I'm a psychologist, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about how to tell if somebody hates you. Okay, there's a few things on this topic, so let's get started. The first thing that is super useful in trying to answer this question of how to tell if somebody hates you is to turn that statement of they hate me into a hypothesis instead of a determined fact. And the reason why is two reasons. Well, there's actually a lot of reasons, but I'll give you two off the bat. The first reason is you cannot directly inspect another person's brain and mind. You can literally not know what somebody is thinking just by looking at them. We can demonstrate this effect right now. Do you know what I'm thinking just by looking at me? No, you don't. So you can't really possibly know whether somebody hates you just off of a feeling. And that leads me on to the second reason. If you think somebody hates you, you are almost always using your internal state, which is probably anxiety, to determine somebody else's internal state or mind, which leads me back to the first point. Can you tell what I'm thinking just by directly looking at me? The answer is no. The term hatred is pretty strong, so it should require pretty strong evidence that somebody actually hates you. So an example of weak evidence would be tone, facial expression, disagreement between two people, lack of invitation, awkward interaction, criticism, or any other instance of behavior where more than one interpretation is possible. You see, the reason why these are low sources of evidence to determine whether somebody hates you is that a lot of these behaviors that I just described could be explained by many other alternative explanations. So, for example, if you think that a delayed message, so somebody not responding to you instantly, is a sign that they hate you, well, what if the reason that they didn't reply to you instantly was because their phone was on silent and their phone was in their pocket and it wasn't on vibrate and they were in an important meeting at work? Can you see how one situation can be explained or re-explained by a different interpretation? Another possible explanation for why you received a delayed message or a delayed response is because maybe the person's phone went flat, or they were driving, or they were in a tunnel, or they were underground, or they were in a movie theater, or they were in a building where the phone reception is blocked. Can you see how one piece of evidence is a low quality source of data and should not be used to infer whether a person actually hates you? A really good starting place to determine whether somebody hates you is to separate observation from interpretation. So an observation is what you can literally see with your eyeballs, and the interpretation is what you paint onto what you can see with your eyeballs. So, for example, you might observe that somebody did not reply to your message in 2 days. That is an observation. They literally did not reply. The interpretation, they hate me or they ignore me, is the explanation your brain is generating and placing or pasting onto the observation. Another one is they disagreed with me twice. Now that's literally an observation. And the interpretation you generate, which is that they want me gone or they don't like me anymore, is what you have copy pasted out of your brain and put onto the particular context, independent of whether that is the actual explanation for what is going on. If several explanations seem plausible or fit the same observation, then the observation does not uniquely support the most negative conclusion or evaluation or explanation. Perhaps you might need an explicit evidence hierarchy to help you determine the answer to this question. So we'll start with what weak evidence would be. As I kind of said before, weak evidence might include a facial expression, response delays, someone being quiet or less enthusiastic or not initiating contact with you, or the person might just have a feeling that they're being disliked. Now, all of these things you observe have multiple different interpretations. Someone being quiet might not mean that they hate you, but because they might have anxiety for themselves, or they might not know what to say. So that's the problem, is one situation can have multiple interpretations. So a source of data that could be considered moderate evidence would be things like repeatedly avoiding you specifically, but that means that they have named you specifically that they are avoiding. They also might make specific hostile comments towards you. And the key is it has to be towards you, as in they literally say it directly to you or to other people, naming you specifically. That is a much stronger level of evidence. And then the strongest level of evidence really is if somebody comes up to you and literally says, I dislike you or I hate you. And they display deliberate, repeated hostility that is sustained towards you. And that probably helps you link what you observe, somebody coming up to you and saying they literally dislike you multiple times. And then probably the interpretation that you're going to layer on top of that. Well, they said they dislike me, so that's probably a pretty accurate observation, interpretation, cake, bang. They probably dislike you. Anything outside of that, a feeling is too weak to be considered a good interpretation, observation, cake. You also might find use out of using comparison data, which is asking yourself, does this person behave similarly towards everybody or just you? Are they generally slow to reply? Do they avoid many social events? Are they blunt with most people? If the behavior is not specific to you, but something more general, then once again, there's a weak source of data, because that means that the interaction that they are engaging with you. So let's say that person A says they hate you, they hate person B, they hate person C, they hate person D. They repeatedly say they hate everybody. That means that it's not necessarily that they hate you, but actually could be something going on with them, actually. And that means that you're not necessarily a hateable or hated person. You're just receiving one anomalous piece of data from somebody else that doesn't represent the whole. Likewise, an unusual interaction between you and someone else should be treated independent of whether the whole relationship is evidence that they hate you. You might have one awkward interaction with a person, but that should be compared against the entire history of the relationship instead of being considered representative of the whole. Perhaps what you'll also find super useful to consider is the idea that the absence of reassurance is not evidence of hostility. If someone does not explicitly demonstrate liking, that does not simply imply disliking. Just because you don't know what they think does not mean that what they think is negative. You don't know what they think literally is you don't know what they think. The interpretation that you paste onto that is just what it is, an interpretation devoid of the objective fact of what is actually happening between you and them. What's also super useful to remember is that you should avoid repeated checkings, asking mutual friends, rereading messages, monitoring response time, studying facial expressions, testing people, and withdrawing to see whether somebody notices, or repeatedly asking for reassurance, which will create a huge amount or a huge clump of low quality data. And it often makes the question less answerable because the patient begins interpreting the effects of their own behavior. The rationale approach is to seek better evidence, not more ambiguous evidence. Literally, if knowing actually matters, then you can literally ask, directly asking the person for whether they dislike you or not is sometimes the easiest way to get the answer instead of prolonged inference. And if the answer is yes, then once again, what's important to do is, if they say they dislike you, it's important to the answer should be compared with behavior over time. One instance of being disliked by one particular person does not create a general rule that they hate you or you are hateable. And repeatedly asking the same question over and over again does not generate any new information. It just generates the same information on repeat. What you should also consider, which is quite useful in this context, is to distinguish whether somebody else's internal opinion of you actually requires action. Even if somebody dislikes you, you may not be required to action it at all. There is no general requirement to be liked by everybody. There is no general requirement to be liked by co-workers, relatives, neighbors, or every member of a social group. The relevant question is asking yourself whether the relationship is functionally adequate. Can the two communicate? Can they cooperate as needed? And are boundaries respected? And is there any actual mistreatment? I said this before, but it's key for me to just highlight it again. It's extremely important to not generalize. If one person dislikes the patient, if one person dislikes you, the correct conclusion is this person may dislike me. It does not logically follow that people dislike me, I am unlikable, or everybody will eventually hate me. Those are new propositions requiring much stronger evidence. one person's evaluation is one data point produced by one particular person, relationship, or context, and is not an inference or a set of circumstances that determine your entire worth. Another thing that's super critical in this big dilemma that I need you to understand is that it's important to differentiate cause from outcome. If someone dislikes you, it does not automatically follow that you behaved wrongly. People can dislike other people for various reasons: value issues, personality differences, competition, misunderstanding, prejudice, projection, jealousy, past conflict, or no clearly identifiable reason. They disliked you because that's just the way they are. They disliked you and you did something wrong, a separate hypothesis. But naturally, let's say you actually did do something wrong, then the natural and logical response is to identify what you did wrong, determine whether repair is appropriate, and make the repair once, and modify your behavior in the future if warranted, and stop treating continued self-analysis as additional problem solving. If the other person continues to dislike them after reasonable repair, then it is no longer fully under your control and therefore no longer fully your responsibility. This also then leads me into the last point of this video, which is that you should identify a stopping rule. Because otherwise, do they hate me can consume an enormous amount of cognitive resources. You might just continuously, perpetually be thinking in your mind, do they hate me, do they hate me, do they hate me, what do I need to do, what do I need to do, what do I need to do. The good stopping rule is if there is no new externally observable information and no concrete decision depends on the answer, further analysis is unlikely to improve accuracy. At that point, the correct classification remains uncertain and the person proceeds with normal behavior. Remember, uncertainty does not equal bad. Uncertainty just means you don't know, and don't know does not mean bad. It could very well mean good. That's the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed. I'm a psychologist from Australia. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more. Bye-bye.